Good evening all, and welcome. Tonight, we're going to be meeting some people you'd rather not meet. But best be warned, some of these stories are truly dark indeed. So I am going to give you a forewarning. These stories, well, two of them, are very dark. Proceed with caution. If you are triggered easily, very sensitive, or have a bad disposition for the truly horrific, I suggest turning around now. It was fun. I mean, there's other videos you can watch. Why not check out something else? But if you choose to remain, you have been cautioned. But for now, it's time to get comfortable and let the darkness take control. I had been single for a very long time. My kids kept telling me to get back in the swing of things, but I kept making excuses. My nephew told me about this dating site. He said there was no harm in talking to people, so I tried it out. I put everything out there, so there were no surprises when or if they met me. I thought that if they still contacted me after reading all I had described about myself, and we matched, then perhaps I would have a coffee with them. I matched with a few and the conversation went well. I met with one gentleman who was way too regimental for my crazy life and kindly declined any more involvement with him. Another guy seemed too pushy and acted like I should be honored to be in his presence. And then came Richard. I had very low self-esteem at the time. That being said, Richard seemed great. We carried on conversations for hours. He lived an hour and a half away, so all we really could do was talk to each other. We talked about our kids, dreams, goals. My daughter even friended one of his sons on Facebook. I was a secretary for some self-help meetings in my town, and he was going to school to be a counselor. Perfect, right? Well, we talked for at least 4 months, but after a while I noticed that he kept having small problems come up. Arguments with his mum, with whom he was living. No money for gas, his truck broke down, his eldest boy was mad at him. Just little things, you know. Not anything that would set me off. But it was his, poor me, to heck with it attitude. I tried to let it go and really be a positive influence in his life. His mother and boys loved me and told me that they had never seen him so happy. Time went on and we were still talking every day. I had an opportunity to come see him, and of course my daughter went with me, so she could meet his son in person as well. I took him and his son out to eat at the only little coffee shop in that town. I knew I was on a fixed income, but I paid anyway because he was going to school and didn't have an income as of yet. We had a good time. We met at his son's house on the hilltop town, and we were having such a good time that I didn't even notice that snow was coming down hard and the roads were icing up. So my daughter and I stayed the night in one of his rooms. It seemed like the closer we got to his family, the more distant they became to him. It was odd. The next day the roads were clear. We said our goodbyes and I went home. Before we left, I received one extra hug from his son's mother-in-law. She whispered in my ear, "Don't fall for him." I thought that maybe there was something she didn't like about me. That came out of left field. The next few days we didn't talk, which I thought was odd. Did I do something wrong? Someone from the self-help meeting told me that there was a man looking for me. She said that he looked disheveled and smelled like alcohol. This wasn't a surprise because I had helped quite a few people get back on their feet. And maybe this one fell off the wagon and just needed to talk. As I was driving down the street, I saw a truck in my driveway. I didn't recognize it at first, but it was him. He found out where I lived and was sitting in front of my house. At first, I was happy, until I looked in his truck and saw him slumped over reeking of booze. At that point, my fixed mode set in, and I asked him in for some strong coffee. He told me that he had a blowout with his mother and she kicked him out and his boys won't talk to him. I got him some clean clothes and told him to take a shower. I figured we could sort it out the next day. In the meantime, I was taking him to a meeting. He sobered up and agreed to go. The whole time at the meeting, my friends were acting like I had lost my mind. Did they see something I was blind of? We went back to my house and he seemed okay. Almost too okay, like nothing at all happened. My son pulled me aside and told me he didn't like him much, but thought maybe he was just being overprotective. I should have paid attention. We went to the store because I wasn't prepared for the extra mouth, and bought 4 2-liters of soda, a gallon of milk, and 2 monsters for him and my son, some chips and stuff for dinner. After we ate, we all watched TV and headed off to bed. I let him sleep in the spare bed in my room, but in the middle of the night he tried to get frisky. At that point, no. My grown kids were in the other room and something just didn't sit well with me, like he wasn't the same man he was before. The next morning, my daughter came running out of the bathroom angry. She said in a loud voice, "Someone pissed all over the toilet." He didn't say a word. Later, we were all eating breakfast, and he started to let food drip out of his mouth onto the table and floor, and was spitting food as he was talking. He took 3 2-liters and drank them back to back, letting some run down his chin. Then, yes, there's more, he took the remote and started to set recordings for his favorite shows, deleting a few of my grandchildren's recordings set for weeks in advance. Wait. What are you doing, my friend? This isn't cool, I told him, but he acted like I said nothing. Then he went to the refrigerator and told me that I have to go to the store and buy more soda and stuff, as it was all gone. He even drank my son's monster and the whole gallon of milk. At this point, my daughter was also livid, so she contacted his son, and he proceeded to tell her that his mum kicked him out the house because he wouldn't get a job and was stealing money and eating them out of house and home. His other son won't talk to him because he keeps asking for money and won't pay it back. He himself was mad at him for lying to me by telling me that he was going to school when he wasn't and was using me as his next big meal ticket. Well, that was it. I got all his stuff together, took it to his truck and asked him to leave. It doesn't end there. He had loosened some bolts on his transmission, making it impossible to move. He begged and pleaded with me to stay. He was at the point snot was coming out of his nose. He said he just wanted to be close to me and that if that meant sleeping in his truck, he would, and that he couldn't live without me. Well, hell to the no. I called his oldest son and told them that if they didn't come with a tow truck and get their dad, his fate wasn't going to be nice. They arrived 2 hours later, apologizing for his father's actions. We found out through his son that for many years he had gone through many unhealthy relationships and took advantage of a lot of women that fell for his lies. He is still trying to friend me on Facebook to this day. I'm a chubby male, so creepers tend to leave me alone. When I was 19, I lived in Kentucky, pretty far from my North Michigan hometown. It was this little town called Pikeville, where there was very little crime. I actually kind of miss it, but I digress. My family came down to visit me for my birthday that year, and we agreed to meet up at the Hardys in town the morning after they arrived. I got there a lot earlier than them, and me being the type to show up 15 minutes early to everything, and them being the type who show up late. As I was standing outside waiting, this guy walks up to me. If you've ever lived in a place like this, you'll know everyone is super friendly. So it didn't strike me as odd when he began talking to me. During our conversation, all kinds of alarm bells should have gone off. Like after he found out I was in college, he said he saw me at a party. This is impossible, as I never once went out to a party. When he found out that I'm a gamer nerd, he started talking all about playing D&D all the time. He kept taking sips out of some alcohol bottle. Mind you, it's 10 AM at this point, and offered me some as well. He began talking about how he lost all his friends because he got into drugs, and I felt a little bad for him. He asked if I wanted to walk around for a bit, and since I knew my family wouldn't be there for a while, I went. This guy had been talking about how he lost all his friends due to drugs, and I felt bad for the guy. That, coupled with the fact that I hadn't encountered anyone like this, and the lack of crime, kind of disarmed that warning part of my brain. We walked and spoke for a little while, maybe 10 minutes, before I realized that we were in a shady-looking part of town. I had never even realized there were shady parts of town of this small town, but here we were. We stopped in front of a house that looked long abandoned with this dark, narrow, sketchy alley next to it. He starts talking about how he knows 2 girls that live here and how they like to party. He tells me about how DTF they are and asks if I want to meet them. It was at this point my common sense finally kicks in. I'm in a bad part of town with a sketchy guy I don't know who's just talking about doing drugs and no one knows I'm here. And now he wants me to go into an obviously abandoned house under the guise of meeting some ladies. I obviously declined his offer and immediately said I needed to go back to my family as they were waiting. He seemed a little upset by this and then asked if I could help him move a pool table into his van, which was conveniently parked down the alley. I declined as well. This is when he began to reach into his jacket pocket. Since those bells started going off, I realized just how much it might look like this guy might try and shank me. At this moment, my stepmom did the only thing she ever did for me. She called me to see where I was, and I took this as an opportunity to hastily exit. The creep followed me for 3 blocks. I don't know what exactly that he wanted, but it was probably just to rob me. Still, that area has a good amount of disappearances and is one of the worst in the country for people being taken. I don't know what could have happened had I agreed, but I can't help but think that one of them is a scene from The Silence of the Lambs, where Bill lures a victim into his van. I hope he got the help he needed and is doing better, but I also hope just as much that I never have the misfortune of running into him again. I was 14 at the time, and had spent the night at my best friend's house, who was a year younger than me. We were pretty responsible, well-behaved kids, so we were trusted to be left home alone at times. That morning it was just 3 girls in the house, me, my friend, and her older sister, who was actually just about to leave for work. Parents were at work too. It was around 10 to 1 a.m., and I was laying in her bed, half awake, trying to fall back asleep. I'm a massively light sleeper, and her sister would always be the loudest in the morning when she got ready. And although me and her older sister, low-key, weren't that fond of each other, I never said anything. My friend Gabby and her sister Cheyenne. I could hear Cheyenne making her way out the front door, Gabby behind her to close and lock it after her. I heard Cheyenne say something along the lines of, "Make sure everything is locked," and how there's a weird man across the street sitting on the curb facing the house. She leaves. I got up because going back to sleep was not an option. I have had sleep issues for as long as I can remember, so I was sitting on her bed with pancakes, and we were just chilling eating our breakfast. This was about 10 minutes after Cheyenne had left, so me and Gabby were just chilling and talking, and I brought up how our sister said something about a guy across the street, and I said something along the lines of, "Your sister is so dramatic." I kid you not, there's knocking right on the door after I said that. Me and Gabby sat there looking at each other in silence. Her bedroom was located at the front of the home, so windows faced the street. I peeped through, but I didn't see a guy across the street. I creeped to the front door and I made a tiny peek to see who it was because her front door had this big old window with some shades. I didn't want whoever was there to see me. Lo and behold, it was him, the guy Cheyenne warned us about. I knew because Gabby silently freaked out and was like, "Oh, it's him." We ran to the bathroom and called her sister. Gabby's house never really got visitors. I know this because I was always there. So there we are, locked in the bathroom, flipping out. Gabby said something like, "He's seen me after Cheyenne left. He knows I'm home alone." I was beyond scared, like, What if he somehow finds his way inside? We just knew he didn't have good intentions, so obviously now he knows there's a young girl in the house by herself. So her sister was on the freeway and wasn't able to return, so she told us to call their uncle who lives nearby. Her Uncle Mike rode a motorbike, who was really nice and tough looking. Me and Gabby are like sisters almost. So while we're waiting for Uncle Mike to show up, the stranger starts to frantically ring the doorbell. It got quiet for a little bit, and then he started to knock on the door really slowly. It was the creepiest thing ever. All her dogs outside are barking like crazy. Then before we know it, I heard her uncle's bike pull up. In relief, we left ourselves out the bathroom and run outside. So us two little girls thank God that he made it quickly. The story isn't over though. When her uncle pulled up, he pointed him out. Is that him down there? Gabby lived across the street from an elementary school, which was only a few houses down. The dude was standing in front of it facing us, watching us. Whoever that weirdo was, I'm just glad I never saw him again. Back in 2006, when I was 17, I met this girl called Cindy through mutual friends. We became really good friends and hung out often over the next few years. As the years went by, she started hanging out with the wrong crowd and acting gangster. By 2009, I had my own car, and the only time Cindy would call me to hang out is if I did her a favor first, which was a ride somewhere. Eventually, I got tired of this, and any time I would call her, she usually wouldn't answer. I got fed up and stopped being her friend. In 2011, after a while of not seeing each other, I forgot who contacted who, but we got together to hang out. As usual, she needs a favor first, a ride over to the next city to visit a friend. Forgetting all the times this happened in the past, I said yes, and this led to one of the most terrifying moments of my life. After picking her up at her house, she tells me last moment that a female friend is coming with us too. Me being an idiot, I pick her up too, and I'm all happy that I'm hanging out with two girls. We get on the highway, and despite asking numerous times where we were going and what we were doing, she wouldn't give me a straight answer. But I drive on as I'm happy to be hanging out with two girls. A while later we reach our destination, and it's a correctional facility. She came to visit a male friend, who we'll just call Suspect. After sitting alone in a lobby and questioning my life choices, they come back and we leave. I was pretty quiet on the drive home, and they didn't even ask me what was wrong. They happily chatted and left me out of the conversation. I dropped them both off and went home. A few days later, Cindy calls me and asks me to hang out again, telling me it will just be her this time. I say yes, and we set up a meeting for the following day. Then something important came up, and I called Cindy to let her know that I wouldn't be able to see her then. She didn't like this, got angry, and hung up. A few hours later, when I was home, she messages me and tells me not to blame her if guys come looking for me. A short while later, I get a call from the correctional facility, and being stupid, I answer it. A gangster-sounding guy addresses me by name, insults me a bit, tells me that I'm about to get lit up. Cindy then messages me saying that there are guys in my neighborhood looking for me, and this is terrifying because I was out in front of my house working on my car. I tried calling her and she doesn't answer. She texts me again letting me know they're close, and I immediately tried to call her again to no reply. She texts me and says the only way she can stop them is to pick her up and drive her to the correctional facility. Being terrified and fearing for my life, I oblige. This time she brings another female friend, Melanie, who I know, and we head over to the correctional facility as they blare their music in my car and act like nothing happened. After they visit the inmate, they proceed to drink in my car despite me telling them not to. They blare out more of their music and eventually spill an entire bag of chips and crush it into the carpet. I ask them to clean it up as they're getting out of the car, but they just walk away without a word. I dump all the garbage and chips out my car onto the street in front of her house and find my iPod on the floor, oily and mixed in with everything. Feeling terrified and disrespected, I block Cindy and her friend's number so they can never contact me again. Later on, through mutual friends, I learned that Cindy and Melanie gave the suspect my name and address and set up the whole thing. My cousin was a drummer in the 60s. He toured the world for many years. When he retired, he brought his own tour bus and drove bands all over the USA. When bands were in the area, the stars stayed in a hotel, but the band would stay with me. This was when bands toured an area for 4 or 5 days. I was 16 and a good cook and a great baker thanks to my grandma. When the bands would arrive, I would have a layout of my specialty 3-day lasagna, bean dip and chips, hamburger pie, my famous peanut butter fudge and peanut butter cookies, and a lot more. Enough to feed an army, my mother would always say. When my favorite band would arrive, we would go hang out with the band and my cousin at the venue, and sometimes watch the show. This one time we were hanging out with the band in front of the club they were playing at. The Star stayed at the back of the bus. My mother, father, sister and cousin were talking near the back of the bus. The band members and I were hanging out near the front of the bus out of sight of my parents, and I was sitting on the hood of our car with my legs crossed, wearing a casual skirt or halter top. The 5 band members were near me, with only one, my crush, next to me about 10 feet away. He was smoking and I really didn't want to breathe that stuff in. Some man was kind of drunk, walked over to where I was sitting. The guys thought I knew him, but I certainly didn't, and pushed me back onto the hood of the car, pulled my skirt up, and was trying to pull my halter top off. He was so fast, he was like an octopus. In no time, the 5 band members had him on the ground while my crush adjusted my clothes and held me in his arms while I stood sobbing. My parents, my sister, and my cousin came running when they heard the commotion and saw me sobbing in my crush's arms and the drunk man on the ground. The police were called and arrived in 3 minutes, and I had to tell them everything the man did, which left me sobbing more. He was taken to jail and I don't know what happened to him, but the fact that these band members jumped into action to defend my honor was appreciated very much. They came out a few more times and said they would take me on the road with them when I turned 18. The week before my 18th birthday, my cousin passed away from a sudden heart attack from all the drugs he used in the 60s with his own band. I was beyond crushed and spent a week in my room crying. So many of the guys I met called to say how sorry they were. A few of the stars also took the time to call, and even my crush called several times. So to all the band members who were wonderful to me and my family, thank you. To the drunk guy who tried to assault and do something worse to a 16-year-old girl, let's never meet again. I was a 26-year-old small female and lived in Texas the time when this happened, and still lived with my parents, but was working to try and afford an apartment. Almost every day I start the day by taking my Bichon Frise dog, Molly, for a walk. She was an absolute love bug and wouldn't hurt a fly. My dad had adopted her for my 20th birthday. I started walking. 2 blocks in there was a house with 3 men on the porch smoking and talking to each other. I see them almost every day when I walk. 2 of them never paid any mind when I was walking past the house, except for one of them who I had never seen before. He was a bit big compared to the other 2, and looked to be in his 20s and was bald. I thought he was one of their friends. When I saw that he was staring in my direction, I quickly faced forwards. Growing up, I was a very antisocial person, so I wasn't the type to greet anyone who I walked past. But these guys didn't seem like the kind of people to say it to. As I kept on walking, I heard the bald man yell out, "Hey gorgeous, nice puppy you got there. Come over here, let me pet him." I walked faster, but turned around to see him walking down the porch and down the sidewalk. "Why are you walking so fast?" he called again. I heard laughter from the other two men. At this moment I began jogging with Molly. Halfway down the block I turned my head to see him walking back to the house, but that didn't stop me from jogging back to mine. When I got home, I had the chance to tell my parents, but stupidly didn't, thinking that it wasn't serious. The next morning I had a bad feeling, so didn't go for the walk. But the day after I did. Feeling a bit more scared, I secretly took my mum's pepper spray just in case. I began the walk. Being the dumbass I was, I walked past the same house, expecting not to see the man, but of all my luck the man was there. He was sitting on a rocking chair on the porch, looking as if he were waiting for someone. When he saw me, he shot up as if his chair were on fire. My eyes widened as he started following me. "Stop walking away, I just want to talk." In fear, I picked up Molly and bolted down the sidewalk, getting away from the man again. But to my horror, I looked to see that he was chasing after me, and I started to freak out. He was fast, too fast. The next thing I know, he's pushing me onto the ground, making me fall on my face onto the hard concrete, and dropping Molly, who began whimpering and barking, knowing that something was terribly wrong. I began screaming for help. He rolled me over, covered my mouth, blocking my screams, clawing at his hands and struggling to get him off me, when I realized I had the pepper spray in my pocket. So I took the can out and sprayed him in his eyes. He screamed out in pain and rolled off me. I quickly got up and picked up Molly and sprinted home, leaving the guy rolling on the ground in pain. I got home and of course frantically explained the situation to my parents. My dad, who is a retired Marine, wanted to go up to the house to confront the man, but my mum told me to go to the police station and file a report. I spoke to an officer and told him what happened. I showed him the bloody nose and cut on my forehead caused by falling face first. He said he would go over to the house and bring the man to the police station. I never got an update on that. A few months later, I avoided the block where the incident happened and wasn't bothered by anyone. The job I worked at was at a 7-Eleven open 24 hours. My friend, who also worked there, asked me to work the night shift because she needed to take care of her sick brother. I accepted and did what I had to do. After the night shift, I walked home. When I turned the corner, I noticed a pickup truck driving slowly and way too close to the sidewalk. I never paid any mind to it until it kept following me. Speeding up my pace, I walked through an empty alley hoping to lose the car, and finally it wasn't there. As I was walking up to my house, I looked behind me one more time to see the same pickup truck driving past. I got the chance to see two men in the truck, panicking and opening the door and slamming it shut. I told my dad what happened and he told my mum. She started going off on me about how if it was the same man, and he knows where I live now. I will admit I felt stupid for going straight home when I should have been looking out to see if the truck was following me. For 2 days, my dad was on the lookout in front of the house in case someone tried something, and nothing really happened until the next night. This night traumatized me, and guilt still consumes me to this day. It was about 2 a.m. when Molly, who was in bed with me, started barking at something at the window behind my bed. Being too tired, lazy and grumpy, I shrugged it off and tried going back to sleep. It wasn't until I woke to hear Molly yelping in pain. I opened my eyes and shot up in a panic and saw my dog's lifeless body in the floor, covered in blood, with a dark figure standing over her. My heart stopped and tears filled in my eyes. I was ready to get off the bed and run, but then a heavy body was thrown on top of me. It was the same man, but he covered my mouth and I let out a scream, hoping my parents would hear. "Do you think you could pepper spray me and get away with it?" "I think not." My vision blurred after the man punched my eye. "Stop fighting. This'll be quick." I kept on kicking and hitting the man, but he didn't flinch. I heard him trying to get his belt off. Pure terror swept over my body. Then all of a sudden, I heard my door swing open with my dad and his gun in hand with Mum behind. As soon as he saw the man, he shot him twice in the shoulder and once in his lower back. The man screamed in agony, and I pushed him off me. My dad then ran up to the man, grabbed him by the collar, and started beating the crap out of him, showing no mercy. My mum ran up to me, hugging me, frantically asking if he hurt me. Ignoring what she was saying, I just ran up to Molly, who was still whimpering in pain, and I held her until she passed. My dad screamed at my mum to call the police and stopped beating the unconscious man, not caring that he had bullets in him. When he saw that he was a sliver away from death, he stayed with me and comforted me until about 5 minutes later, when sirens were heard in the distance. My dad dragged the almost perished man outside to the police while paramedics came up to my room to see if I was okay. Turns out that not only the man was at the house, but his 2 other friends who were waiting 2 houses away in a van had a rope and a gag and a pack of tweezers for reasons I never want to know. When the man recovered from the beatdown my dad gave him, police took him into custody. He said the plan was to break in, take me, and go to the same house and do horrific things with me until they were done. The reason why the guy tried to go right into my bedroom was because he wanted me first. He stabbed my dog, my best friend. Not only that, but he tried to assault me in the worst way possible. The fact of that makes me want to throw up all over my screen. Every day I always thought what I could have done to avoid this whole thing from happening. Most of you think she was just a dog, but to me she wasn't. I never stopped thanking my parents for saving my life, and for the man, he got life in prison. I hope he rots for the rest of his life. His friends were also caught along with him and were sentenced to 16 years for multiple charges. I still live with my parents, not because of lack of money for an apartment, because of how paranoid and scared I became of being alone. As I'm writing this, I feel disgusted and guilty. I have a neighbor that I've gone along with since I moved in 8 years ago. My neighbor is a policeman and lives with his wife and his only daughter. He's a very kind person, enough so that he has helped many people financially and given people a roof over their heads to help improve their lives. He has taken 2 men into his house that he feeds and helped get jobs. They were so kind and funny people that even I liked them, and they've helped me many a times and made my life a bit more fun. I always saw them in and out of my neighbor's house, until one day they stopped going. I figured that they had found a house after months of searching, and 2 weeks after, I visited them since I finally graduated college. I go to their house, and when the door was open, it was the wife, Veronica. Her face was pale as if all her energy was drained out of her. She broke down into tears in front of me. I walked inside and we walked towards the living room, and she tells me that her husband Robert is in jail. This is from Veronica's perspective. On the 24th of May, 2016, Robert had told me to bring Jessica, their daughter, to school because she was late. I agreed, as he then left for work. Jessica comes to me, telling me she's not ready to leave. I look at her and tell her that I'm going to be late for work, and ask if she could walk to school. She said she could. I gave her some snacks and she left. 3 hours later, they call me from school saying she never got to class. I'm scared. I call Robert and tell him that Jessica isn't at school, so he asks his superior to let him look for her with his 3 others, and they agreed. He searched everywhere, and it occurred to him that she might be home. He goes home and walked towards the front door, and sees traces of blood. Thinking someone other than his daughter was inside, he pulled out his firearm and signaled his partner to come in with him. He slightly opened the door and started walking fast, following the trail of blood, expecting the worst. The blood leads him to Jessica's room, and he opens the door, terrified of what he might find. He opens the door and finds his daughter silently crying. Jessica was bleeding between her legs, her face swollen from what appeared to be beating, and her face looked dead. She couldn't even stand properly. He gave his firearm to his partner and ran to his daughter. He asked what happened, tears running down his cheeks. Moments after, I arrive from work to start the search, and I walk in to see the traces of blood and begin to panic and run to Jessica's room like my life depends on it. I shove the door open wide and see her. I couldn't help but cry. I ask her what happened and am sobbing like crazy. Robert's partner called backup and an ambulance. Robert didn't let me hold Jessica. He kept holding her as if his grip around her would help. I felt like a useless mother. The ambulance arrived and they took her to the hospital, and Robert volunteered to go with her and left me in the house as police officers questioned me, but there was nothing for me to say. I was shocked. Soon after, they let me go to the hospital and I asked where my daughter was. They told me that they took Jessica into surgery because, as you can probably guess by now, she was the victim of something horrific. Someone broke her from the inside and out. My legs weakened and I fell to the floor crying uncontrollably. I knew it was my fault. The nurses came and helped me into a room where Robert was waiting. He looked at me and asked with his face strained, "You didn't take Jessica to school, did you?" I stood quiet. I couldn't even speak, only cry. He then began yelling at me. He said, "You didn't take her to school, and this is what happened to her." I started crying even harder while nodding. I expected him to hit me, since I deserved it. But he didn't let me feel guilty. He left guilt consume me more than it already had. Several hours later, the doctor came, saying everything went fine, but she had lost a lot of blood and had suffered brain trauma, and that she wouldn't be able to have children in the future. Since they had to take out her reproductive organs, they were in that bad of a condition. Robert looks at me, stands up, and walks away. The doctors tried to stop him, since he wasn't in the right state of mind to go, but he still left. 8 days after, Jessica is at home and won't let me help her bathe or even touch her. Her smiles, her happiness, and her childhood have all been taken away from me, and I'm to blame. The day after, Robert goes to Walmart to buy groceries. He spots the 2 men who left the house along with 3 other people, and as he got close, he heard them say that they did that to our daughter. That they took turns doing it. That Robert was an idiot, and he wouldn't even figure out it was them. Robert got angry, but he bought the groceries, and as he went out he saw the men and acted as if nothing had happened. They greeted each other normally, and Robert smiled and went to his car and cried. He couldn't believe that people he helped would do something so horrifying to a child after he trusted them. So he went home, and with the groceries went to the master bedroom and left again. He himself said in court that he waited until dark, took the 2 firearms he owned, and went on a motorcycle, and finished their lives. He went to the police and confessed what he had done. They put him in prison, and it didn't take long for him to go to court. The evidence was in his favor, since they found that what was inside our daughter belonged to the men. He confessed as guilty and explained why he did it, and apologized to the mothers of the 2 men, saying that their sons were disgusting after he helped them, that they hurt his daughter, and now she's traumatized, will never look at life the same, has lost her innocence and will never be able to have children, and that if he had to, he would do it again. One of the mothers forgave them, since she would have done the same thing, and she accepted her son was no angel, and after he had done something so horrible to a child, while the other woman never forgave him. This is the end of Veronica's perspective. Robert was sentenced to 10 years in jail but got out after 4 for good behavior, when in truth the judge was a good friend, who on the second case did cut his jail term short. Throughout those years, Jessica and her mother had been going to family therapy, and a psychologist and I have been trying to help them. Jessica, now 12, has improved a bit, but is still scared of the outside world. She enjoys the time with me more than with her mother, and she's still seeing a therapist but hates to talk about what happened that day as it's drilled into her mind. From my perspective, he doesn't deserve that time in jail, but who am I to judge? I would do the same if someone were to hurt a child of mine. This just goes to show that no matter how kind someone is to someone else, they might not receive the same treatment, and that in the end, we don't know who to trust. Have a good day, and be aware of your surroundings. Hey guys, it's Mort here, and thank you so much for listening. Told you those stories would be bad. I hope that you guys, you didn't cringe too hard. I tried to really use ambiguous terminology, but I'm pretty sure we all knew what was going on. Very horrific stuff indeed. As always, a huge thank you to my lovely patrons who help by donating a little bit every month to help keep the channel running. If you'd like to donate to receive some cool prizes, feel free to, check out my Patreon. Link is in the description, and of course it would mean a lot. So let me know what you think. If there's a story that you would like narrated on the channel, you can send it to my email or post it on my Reddit page. Either are fine, and just make sure to add plenty of good paragraphing, punctuation and stuff, and if it's good, it might make it onto a video. So let me know. For now guys, I'm going to sign off. Stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next one.